further ado, please welcome our speaker for Tradition 2, Arisa from Boston.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arisa. I am most definitely an alcoholic. The date of my last drink was October the 13th of 1993, and for that I'm truly, truly grateful. And I want to start off by thanking Andy for asking me to speak. Danielle, thank you for your service. Thank you also to Cece, Wassel, and Charlie for your service this afternoon too. So I think it's wonderful that we're doing that you guys are doing this, and it's a little intimidating, to be honest. I mean, like we say all the time, there are no experts in AA, but then we do these sorts of things, and it's like, and it's like the history and experience and everything. No pressure, no pressure. And there's so much. It's such a rich, history. So I want to start off with the thing about Tradition 2 that's different from all the other traditions. It has one thing that makes it stand alone in all its glory. It is the only tradition where on the shades, the short form of the tradition is longer than the long form of the tradition. So just a little factoid for you. It states in the book that for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. In the long form, that last sentence isn't there. It ends at, as he may express himself in our group conscience. I found that very interesting in general. I always have. When I talk about traditions, fair warning, it's very hard for me to talk about traditions without talking about concepts, especially Tradition 2, because it's talking about ultimate authority here, right? For our group purpose, there's but one ultimate authority. So we have three legacies in AAs, right? Unity, service, and recovery. And the 12 traditions are what makes our groups work. But this idea of how we are organized and this idea of authority, is so important in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we have a tendency to really kind of get the wrong idea of what authority is actually about, right? So I want to just talk a little bit about, bringing this into the service structure and how that works. So for me, the concepts, a lot of people are like, ugh, boring, but for me, the concepts are really, really fascinating. Concept 1, we look at final responsibility and ultimate authority residing in the collective conscience of our fellowship. That was all about Bill Wilson deciding that, he couldn't do this for us forever. He was going to die. And his journey, in fact, one of his greatest successes, he would say, was this greater and greater deflation of the ego, that he was willing to give this over to us, right? That he really had to push a lot for this conference that we have today. When I get to Concept 2 states that when in 1955 the AA groups confirmed the permanent charter for their General Service Conference, they thereby delegated the conference complete authority for the active maintenance of our world services, and thereby made the conference, accepting in any changes to the 12 traditions or in Article 12 of the conference charter, the actual voice and effective conscience for our whole society. So what, right? How does that work with Tradition 2? So everything, the reason I want to read those two is because I don't think we can really, really get the deep flavor for what Tradition 2 is talking about without those first two concepts. So this idea, first of all, that that final responsibility is going to be in the collective conscience, right? That's now our General Service Conference. We see it first in the group conscience in a group, right? And that with that is how authority is. We're this upside down triangle, right? And so the groups are the ones that hold all the power. Anybody in service is supposed to be working for the group, not vice versa. We're not leaders in the same sense of the word as everybody else talks about. And when first we organize the conference, right? And then this, the charter is what makes sure that all of the delegated authority that's necessary is back with our groups, right? That's what's so important. So when we talk about, where the history of this comes from, Bill always likes to tell the same story over and over. His first experience with this is when he was offered a job by Charlie Towns at Towns Hospital. And, he needs a job. He's going to lose the house and, whatever. And it's not a bad thing for him to do. He has every legal right to do this. But yet, if he did, it wouldn't be best for the group. And that when he went back and he told the group about, this great job that he had, even Lois was like, I don't know about that, right? So, wives and husbands are one thing, but when you get to the group and they're also just sitting there, looking down at their shoes before somebody's willing to tell him, Bill, you can't do this to us. The group has to come first. Our common welfare has to come first, right? Unity has to be what we're really dealing with here, because if we don't hang together, we die separately. Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. If there was no group for me to walk into, where would I be today? So that's where this begins, right? And then we go into this, okay, so what happens in this idea if, for our group purpose, there's only one ultimate authority, only one, and that's a loving God, right? As he expresses himself through the group conscience. But that's not how a group starts. And this evolution, it's also not how our conference started. Bill was the first one. He was the one who was out there trying to sober up drunks out on the Bowery, pulling them up and saying, God will get you sober, right? And none of them wanted what Bill was trying to peddle. And it was through Lois Wilson and Dr. Silkworth that he was able to realize what he had been missing. And what he was missing is that, they had no reason. They had no reason to listen to what he was saying. He wasn't talking the language of the heart. Dr. Bob, was the very first person that Bill Wilson went to say Bill Wilson, right? That the 12th step was what was happening there. Right. And that he was willing to listen to Lois, who said, yeah, but Bill, you're staying sober. When he's no one's staying sober, I shouldn't keep doing this. She said, you're staying sober. And then Silkworth is the one who said, why don't you explain to them what the problem is? Because how do you want a solution to a problem you don't understand? Thank God Bill Wilson was willing to listen. Because when Abby Thatcher walked into that room, he already knew who Abby Thatcher was. He knew that Abby getting sober had nothing to do with Abby. And he already understood the problem because he had gotten it from Silkworth. So when Abby walked in, Bill Wilson was primed. Now, how do we take those ideas into this, group that we now have? And let's be honest, Bill writes a lot about being, a very ego-based guy. He is a larger-than-life kind of guy, right? And he wanted to run the show. Who wouldn't? I mean, let's be honest. Until the time that he died, and I loved, there are a lot of readings that I was going back, and Our Great Responsibility is a book that came out last year from Alcoholics Anonymous. If you don't have it, you really, it's just a phenomenal book. Here it is. Okay. Can you tell I was area literature chair? Anyway, one of the things it has in the back is some writings from other people. Right. And it's talking about, there's this one where, Dr. John Norris is talking about the first conference after Bill died. And he said, I realized all of us, whenever there was a conflict, we'd be waiting. And I was sitting there waiting to hear what Bill would have to say about it. Right. That we have a tendency to listen to our old timers, hopefully, because they do have experience, strength, and hope. That's what we deal with in Alcoholics Anonymous. We deal with experience, strength, and hope. We're all full of opinions, let's be honest. But nobody here really cares much about what our opinions are. An opinion about an experience I haven't had isn't worth very much. What I want to hear is I want to hear the story. I want to hear your experience, strength, and hope, because that's something I can take to the bank. Right. And so when we get together, Alcoholics Anonymous is this very, very interesting place where we're not really supposed to be all worked up about our rights. And in our society today, it's all about my right to speak. I have a right to do whatever it is I have a right to do. But in AA, I have a responsibility. I have a responsibility to make sure your voice is heard. I have a responsibility to learn to listen, because a group conscience cannot happen if I'm not willing to listen. And everybody's voice is important. Most groups do not put much weight onto the minority opinion, but we do. We do. We want to make sure that everybody has a path, towards petition of grievances, for example, right? If you don't like the way something is going, you can say something about it. You really can. Alcoholics Anonymous is meant to be a place where we're walking shoulder to shoulder. It doesn't matter that I have 27 years and you may have, 27 days. It doesn't. It doesn't. But let me get very clear about what our group purpose really is. It's to better carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous to the person who's still sick and suffering out there. Our question all the time is, who isn't in the room and how can we better carry the message to them? That's what we're supposed to be looking at in any business meeting or area meeting. Who isn't in the rooms and how can we better carry the message to them? How do we get them in the room? Because you can't catch them if they aren't in the room. You can't catch them if they aren't in the room. And isn't that what Lois Wilson and Dr. Silkworth both told Bill? They were the first people telling Bill, wake up, you got this wrong. Your idea's fine, it's just not working, right? And he was willing to listen to somebody else. He was open-minded. And guess what? Because he listened, a miracle happened. Dr. Bob got sober, right? That's the way AA works. Billy did such a great job last week. And, when he talked over and over again about, these traditions came because of our problems, not because we did things right. This is not a collection of things we did right. This is a story of our colossal failures, right? Alcoholics Anonymous is a story of a lot of us who are colossal failures. And then how we tripped and fall. We trip and fall over each other all over the place. One of the things we say at my home group's business meeting is that although we may not always agree, right, we all have the same goal. I'm paraphrasing. We all have the same goal. Our job is to better carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we may disagree how to best do that, but we're all here taking time out of our lives to learn to do better, to try to do better. And if I can assume love from you, we'll make progress. We'll make progress. It is not our job as AA members to change AA. It just isn't. That's not what we're elected to do if we get elected to group secretary or group coffee maker or GSR or delegate or trustee. That's not our job. My grand sponsor used to say, and he was a world trustee, he used to say that our job is to uphold the policies, procedures, and principles already in place. Because if we uphold the policies, procedures, and principles that are already in place, then the group conscience gets heard. That's our job. Our job is to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. I need to make sure that your voice is being heard, and you need to make sure that mine is. And that way, because Alcoholics Anonymous is not a self-help program. We're not here to be, it's supposed to be about, taking down the ego, not about building them up, right? Our leaders are but trusted servants. What does that mean? It's another place, Bill talks in the 12th step about not putting our work on the service plane. Now, that's not the same thing. It means, doing it for you, what you can do for yourself. But service in Alcoholics Anonymous is, again, always with that idea of who's not in the room, who isn't in the room, right? That I am to serve the greater good, the collective conscience of Alcoholics Anonymous. A delegate. So I'm from the Boston area, and I'm in, Area 30. And our delegate comes, down to the General Service Conference. And this past year, her job was to understand the collective conscience of those in Area 30 and to carry it to the General Service Conference. What is not her job is to lobby for her constituents. This is what AA in Area 30 wants, and we want to make sure that we get X, Y, or Z, okay? That's not her job. Her job is to enter into a discussion so that the decisions that are made, the conference actions and such that are come to, right? That those are good for all of Alcoholics Anonymous in the United States and Canada. We have to, that's why we're trusted servants. What does that mean? So the right of participation comes in, right of decision, right? We want everybody to participate. And right of decision says that if I give you a job, I'm going to trust you to do the job. And if you have a question, you're to come back to the person who delegated the job to you. If you're make coffee maker in your group, right? Okay, great, you're coffee maker. Well, let's say we're running out of coffee. So, you can either go to the grocery store, or you can go to Costco, or you can order it from Amazon, or whatever. We're not going to say you have to go to the Stop and Shop on Harvard Street because, that's where I went when I did it. No, you have the right to do whatever, within the limits of your job. And it's important to remember that. Now, if you don't know where a grocery store is, you should come back and say, hey guys, can you show me where a grocery store is? Or maybe I don't have the cash up front. How do I handle that? Like, if I have questions, I come back to you. And that's what trust is about. If we are going to ask somebody to do a job, we need to give them what it is they need to be able to do it. That's what it means to be a trusted servant, right? So when I am asked to do whatever it is, whether it be delegate or, like I said, coffee maker or, meeting secretariat, area literature, whatever it is, you are supposed to trust me. If I do something and you ask me why, I have to give you good reasons for that, right? But trust is an essential part of Alcoholics Anonymous. Mutual trust and respect. Mutual trust and respect really, really comes into focus with tradition 2 here. We have to presume good. We have to presume good in people. We have to assume that they really are trying their very best, that this is their 100%. And it's hard as somebody who, I got up to Boston. I started my home group, right? And we have a steering committee, and there's a lot of confusion, up here because there were a lot of steering committees. That wasn't a very common form of organization for Alcoholics Anonymous here. And why did we have a steering committee? And people are still asking, why do we have a steering committee? One of the things that, I will tell you is that it is so easy. I don't know about you guys, but if you go into almost any group, you can generally tell sitting at a business meeting who started the group, which few people started the group, right? And everybody kind of just looks over at them, right? And they automatically, they carry some depth and weight because they did. They started the group, and that's not a bad thing, okay? However, one of the things I know about myself, I'm an artist, okay? I identify with Bill. Like, I really identify with Bill, okay? And I've been a GSR in 3 states, and I love getting into service, and I love running conferences. I did Share a Day in New York. I love doing this stuff, okay? I'm the person who, like, I get ideas, and I can just put them together. That's one of my talents. And it's also can be my Achilles heel, right? So one of the reasons that I decided that I wanted a different kind of structure was exactly because of this, because I know me. And reading about Bill, who was trying everything he could to not put the focus on how much he gave to this program, on we need a conference. We need to bring everybody else's voice in. We need to hear from you, right? And I'm the girl who wants to keep control. That is who I am. Let's be honest. I do it better than you. I do. Maybe you don't think so. But that's where my mind goes. If you want it done right, give it to me. If you want it done right, I will do it bigger and better than, like that's how my mind works. How do you help somebody like that? All I can tell you is that, learning about myself through the steps and through our history and through the concepts, learning to live with the concepts in a family, right? That is how I began to see, like, I am the girl who I want to keep my finger in it all the time. Okay, so the way my home group is set up is that, you're elected. We have bylaws where you're elected to steering committee, and that's great. But a lot of steering committees you stay on for life. I didn't like that model. Okay, because I would totally want to stay on for life, and I would want to get to have the decision vote, right? I mean, when all else fails, I want to have the tie-breaking vote. Let's be honest, right? And so one of the first things that I did was I made it a stipulation of you can serve for 5 years and then, you can run again, but you have to run. I wasn't elected originally. I wasn't. You guys didn't get to choose whether or not I was going to be on the steering committee. I elected myself because I started the group. That's reasonable. I also asked people that I, wanted to be on the steering committee originally. That's what I did. And that's exactly how, AA started. That's exactly how our trustees happened originally. Bill asked people that he knew, including his brother-in-law, right? That's how we started off. But what happened from there? What happened from there? The story of what happened from there, that Bill was willing to turn this over down to, he's writing the big book. He's writing the big book. One of my favorite stories, Fitz Mayo. You guys don't know who Fitz Mayo was. Fitz is one of the ones who we pretty much single-handedly have to thank for God as we understand him. There was a lot of debate over how much God should be in the big book. And the guys down in Akron wanted a lot of God. And, then there were guys like Fitz who wanted it to be totally, just psychological. And these debates that would happen, let's be honest, Bill's doing the blood, sweat, and tears here, right? He's the one doing the trying to draft this thing, and then it gets shredded by people. You missed a spot, Bill. You missed a spot. Don't you love the missed spots? But it's because Bill was willing to invite participation in that right of participation. Hey, this is our story. This is the collective conscience here. This is how we stay sober. That's why the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous has so much depth and weight, because we of Alcoholics Anonymous wrote this book. We of Alcoholics Anonymous wrote this book. And you can tell the difference between what Bill wrote on his own versus what Bill wrote in that collective conscience. You go and you read his essays on the 12 traditions, which are also wonderful, but they're very different in how they come across, right? One of Bill's greatest pieces of writing, in my opinion, is found in a very little known book, but in this group, probably not so little known, called the AA Service Manual and 12 Concepts for World Service. I love the way Bill writes in here. And his Leadership in AA, Ever a Vital Need, right? When he talks about, so people in AA have a tendency to pervert this idea of tradition too. For our group purpose, there's one ultimate authority, a loving God is the, which means they don't want to hear from me. There's a big brouhaha in my home group this past year. There were some people who really, really thought that I was domineering, And the truth is that I have strong opinions, but I also have a lot more sobriety than most of them, right? And I have a lot more experience than a lot of them. And you know what? I shouldn't be quiet. Thank God Bill Wilson wasn't quiet. Thank God he didn't become some wallflower who stopped talking, because we wouldn't have a conference today. We wouldn't have delegates today. We wouldn't have expanded the trustees to have more alcoholics on it. We wouldn't have those things if he had just said, well, you guys are right. No, he was the minority opinion. Bill Wilson was the minority opinion. Sometimes our old timers, by God, we have to be the minority opinion. And it's uncomfortable. You know what? I don't like to be disliked. And if you're a woman and you're noisy, there are a lot of interesting things that get said about you. I got to be truthful. Sometimes I have to write inventory. If I had a Y chromosome, I wouldn't be getting this crap. Quite literally, one of the things that people were up in arms about was that there are not more men on the steering committee. You want to know why there are not more men on the steering committee? Because they don't do their jobs. Because they don't meet the job descriptions, because they have literally had to be asked to step down so that the job gets done. And why aren't they mad at the men who didn't do the job? I don't know. Our leaders are but trusted servants. If you're not going to be trustworthy, don't stand for the job. In AA, in our service structure, we don't run for positions. We don't run for positions. We stand for them. I am willing to let my name stand. I am a qualified member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have what it takes. Therefore, I am willing to serve. Can I be willing to serve? Have I made sure that my family is going to be on board with it, that I can meet the responsibility of it? Because we have a responsibility statement. And it's not to say, oh, I didn't have time for it. I'm sorry. That's not a good enough excuse. In our service manual, it says if you're doing the job, we should remove you. And if you happen to have a Y chromosome, I don't know what to tell you. Step up. Step up. In most of AA, I'm the minority. In most of AA, women are not the ones getting to do as much. In my home group, people sometimes, that's a women's meeting? No, we're not. We're not a women's meeting. We are a meeting with strong female leaders. And I don't see that as a bad thing. When it talks about leadership in AA, ever a vital need. Leadership, ever a vital need. We do have leaders in Alcoholics Anonymous. By God, we need them. Every sponsor is a leader. Every sponsor is a leader. And it's important that we understand that there are certain qualities that are needed for really good leadership. Judgment, vision, responsibility, flexibility, stability, and tolerance. Those are the main aspects that Bill outlines for what is needed in a good leader. How do I meet those? And why would I want to elect somebody that I can't say meets those qualities? Who is best qualified in Alcoholics Anonymous is who we should be putting in those positions. It breaks my heart when I go to some of the meetings and I watch some of these elections happen. And literally, people are saying, well, because he was this, he should be that, right? We should elect him because it's his turn. No, who is best qualified? Is this person actually the best qualified person? Because this is life and death. This is life and death. People die if we don't do these jobs. If the meeting isn't open, people die. That's what happens in AA. We have to be willing to step up to our responsibility. It says that a leader in AA service is therefore a man or woman who can personally put principles, plans, and policies into such dedicated and effective action that the rest of us want to back him up and help him with his job. That's what a leader ought to do. That it's not about me telling you what you should do. And later it says, good leadership originates plans, policies, and ideas for the improvement of our fellowship and its services. But in new and important matters, it will nevertheless consult widely before taking decisions and actions. Good leadership will also remember that a fine plan or idea can come from anybody, anywhere. Consequently, good leadership will often discard its own cherished plans for others that are better, and it will give credit to the source. One of the best services I do for Alcoholics Anonymous, in my opinion, is I try to help you see what you could be doing in the service structure. Because we need you. Whether it's in my home group, I'll never forget one of now he's the husband of one of my sponsees. And he was coming into the meeting because, he was willing to go to any lengths for her, right? Let's be honest. And it wasn't his home group. But we had very few men that were coming and even fewer who were willing to do any service in the group whatsoever. And I went up to him and I asked him if he was interested in a service job. And he said, well, it's not my home group. And I said, I understand that. But it would really still be great if you would be willing to take a job. Because the truth is that there are very few men doing service in this meeting. And men don't want to do service in this meeting because they don't see men doing service in this meeting. I asked him to be a leader, not a home group member. He's like, well, what did you have in mind? And I said, well, how about you pass a basket? He's like, oh, I could do that. And you know what? From there, other guys were willing to do other service positions. And it took years for him to actually join the group. He did eventually join the group, but it was a slow working on him. But that's the thing. If I can let you know how important your service will be to this group, you might want to be a part of it. I as I said, I was area literature chair. And I rotated into that in the middle of the pandemic because the chairperson had to step down. And so, by the way, AA works, I am entitled to stay on as area literature chair. But the truth is that we had somebody else who was coming to those literature meetings who's on fire for AA. He's on fire for AA. He's got a few years sober, meets all the requirements, and he was coming to the literature meetings. And so I told the incoming chair, I said, you really ought to ask him. Yeah, I ask him because he's excited about this and he will bring vitality to it. And you guys, I need you in the trenches with me. That's the truth. If I do all of the jobs, I got plenty of jobs in AA. Let's be honest. I got plenty of jobs in AA. But do you? Because I feel like I'm in the middle of AA. Do you? Am I looking around to make sure that you feel a part of? Am I doing that? Because I think that's one of the greatest things that we can do from a position of real leadership. I go into meetings sometimes and I watch the first few rows just get plastered with people. They come in, they rush in, they save a bunch of seats because they got to get a good seat, right? Where I started sitting in the back of the room years ago, 20 plus years ago. I started sitting in the back of the room because that's where the newcomers are. That's where the newcomers are. That's where real 12-step work happens right at the end of the meeting. What I'd like to see us do is rope off those first couple of rows for the newcomers, except they wouldn't go there anyway, but still, how about we make it possible so that they feel comfortable? How about we're there where they are? Then I had to stop sitting in the back row because then all my sponsees started sitting in the back row. I'm like, no, so I move around all the time, right? Because that's what I want them to see. My grand sponsor also said that any problem in Alcoholics Anonymous could be solved by good sponsorship. Good sponsorship, the best leadership we have, good sponsorship. And I know there's this big push today to have, service sponsors and all that. I was lucky and blessed enough to have a 3 Legacy sponsor. And I always have felt that is incredibly important to me. That I don't want somebody to have to go somewhere else to learn the traditions and the concepts, that needs to be part of what I am teaching them. I was taught that when I walked in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I needed to learn how to locate myself on the circle and the triangle. And that I was always going to have a job in Alcoholics Anonymous, always. Always have a home group, always have a sponsor, always have a job, at least one, right? And that I do service at every AA meeting that I show up at. Maybe specifically, I've assigned myself greeter and butt sweeper and, whatever else it is, chair picker-upper. What job can I do? How can I be of service? Because if it's those people working side by side. You watch the people who are looking down at the ground. They're trying to get stuck in. They're picking up chairs because they want to get stuck in. And that's where the opportunities lay. That's what real leadership is to me. Good leadership never passes the buck. When it's my fault, I have to be willing to say, I was wrong. I was wrong. One of the things we're going through at my home group is I spent the last year rewriting our bylaws, right? And we're taking them to the group. And because there are changes that need to be made. There really are. Because I've been listening to people. Our group is 10 years old. I got reelected to, serve another 5 years. And my term is up in the fall. You know what? I need to rotate. I don't need to rotate because I've got bigger and better things to do, although it would be fun to get to do some other jobs, to be honest. I need to rotate because it's your group. It's not my group. It can't always be my group. I'm still going to be there. It's going to be my home group. But it's so important. Phil Wilson was willing to do it with Alcoholics Anonymous. Who am I to think that I have to be there for everything? Who am I to think that way? Right? And yet, at the same time, I have to be there and I have to take responsibility. That there were things we couldn't have seen. My home group, the structure is pretty much this is it. But the problem is most people don't know what's in the service manual. They don't understand the concepts. They don't understand the traditions. They don't know this stuff. How do we teach it to them? Well, one of the things that I think ought to change is that before you run for steering committee, you probably should have had a service position outside of the group. I didn't think to say that before because I just kind of assumed people would. But we have people who don't know what the traditions and the concepts and anything about them. They don't know how AA works, right? So you end up with problems. You end up thinking that, when you say, by right of decision, one of my favorite stories by right of decision, this is good leadership stuff. The first year of the Freedom Trail Conference. If you guys aren't coming, if you don't know about it, Freedom Trail Conference is a conference of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, it's listed at GSO. It's the last weekend of January. Hope you guys will all come. All contributions go to GSO. But the first year of this conference, right? I pretty much had put the whole thing together. I've been working on it for years. Before I started the group, I'm working on this conference, right? And this conference is not like the Jersey Shore Roundup that you guys have. It's not one of those big splashy things. This is one where we are really trying to get the newcomers in the door. And it happens at MIT, and it's free to anybody who can't afford to come, and it's $40 whole if you can afford it. And if you can't afford to come, we give you a service position, and we get, pretty much half of the people generally are scholarship people, which is pretty cool. But we've spent, and then, so if you're going to give somebody a scholarship, see, my first conference, I couldn't afford to go. And they said, do a shift at the registration table, and that'll be how you get your ticket. And that's where the principle came from, right? That's where I learned it. So we need jobs. So we're going to make coffee. We started out actually at MGH, and I've bought urns. I've got a team of people to make coffee, right? And we know where, we've done a run through, all of this. And the week before the conference, the steering committee says, somebody on the steering committee says, we shouldn't have coffee at this. You shouldn't have coffee at an AA conference? Are you kidding me? The thing goes from Friday to Sunday noon, and we shouldn't have coffee. And mind you, at MGH, the coffee carts do not function after Friday night. This is not a good scenario. Not to mention the $40 is all, we had, the speakers, expenses, and we had coffee and snacks. Those are all of our expenses. We didn't have to pay MGH because they have to do a certain amount of outreach and such and, whatever. So they don't charge for, AA meetings. They don't know how to charge for AA meetings. So, we make a donation, but all we have to do is pay for coffee. So what am I supposed to do? Hand out money at the door? Here, go find your coffee somewhere on the street? It's crazy. But anyway, they decided to kill the coffee at the conference. Just full out decided, no. And I was so dumbstruck that fortunately, AA also has a concept that talks about, the right of petition and redress, right? And I was able to go back and say, hey, actually by right of decision, I chair that committee, and I've submitted, all of the, I made pie charts. I don't make pie charts. I've given them all of the information right up. Here's what we got, blah, 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 blah. We have the people, we have the coffee, we have the urns, we have the process, we have everything down. And it's actually not your jurisdiction. And I had to tell you, there were people that were really angry at me for bringing that up, for being willing to stand up for my principles. And I'm not always popular. I say a lot of things people don't like. You know what? But I still believe that it was for the good of AA. I might be wrong. Often quite wrong. Okay. But please don't assume malice. When we get into our business meetings, when you listen to other people who are just completely opposite from you, how about we not assume malice? There's enough of that in the world. Why, oh, why would we do it here? The whole point, consequently, good leadership will often discard its own cherished plans for others that are better, and it will give credit to the source. I'll give you another quick one where I'm on the flip side. Now, I'm in charge of ordering the cookies for the meeting, right? And I go out to Costco and I buy cookies. And, I've been doing this for a while. And which is fine, except Costco stopped carrying Oreos. This is an issue, right? I don't know that it's an issue. I just get what they do have. I don't need the cookies anyway. It's just, you got to have cookies at AA, right? So I go and I get the cookies. Okay, fine, we got cookies. Well, this came up at the business meeting. Not having Oreos was a major deal to some people at the business meeting. And now we have just moved, and our rent has gone from $85 a month to $600 a month, okay? This is a steep step up, right? Plus, we also now have to buy insurance and everything, okay? So I'm looking at saving $15 is a big deal over time, because we're having a little bit of seventh tradition issue, okay? And so as the discussion is going, I'm saying, like, I just don't see what the big deal is, like in a group that's having problems right now with money issues. I think that this is a reasonable concession for us to make. And you know what? Somebody who wasn't sober very long, they raised their hand and they said, but newcomers know us as the meeting where the Oreos are. Changed my vote. Changed my vote. They come because of the Oreos. I don't care what gets you in the door. If it's the Oreos, fine. Like I'll chip in an extra $15 into this, seventh tradition. I'll buy the freaking Oreos. We've had Oreos ever since. We've had Oreos ever since, and now I have to order them from Amazon because Costco still doesn't carry them. But for unity to exist, all must have a voice. I no longer have the right to make decisions for everyone, even though I started the group. Everyone doesn't have to be happy every time. It's not an all-win kind of situation every time. Sometimes I get voted down. You know why I think people think I always get my way? Because I don't leave. Because I'm willing to get voted down and stay. That's why. That's the only reason. It's not that I always get my way. Tradition 2 shows us how to practice these first 3 steps in a group setting. That's what it does. It helps me relate better to you, to understand that, I don't get power, choice, and control over everything. I am but one voice in this. My voice counts, but I am but one voice. In the 3rd step, we offer ourselves to God. And that word offer, like when we pass the 7th tradition, in church, they would call it an offering plate. And when I put my money in the hat, it ain't my money anymore. Now I can go to the business meeting and I can participate in the discussion about how to use that money, but I'm now one voice. And it doesn't matter if I put 50 cents, 5 cents, or $500 in. It really doesn't matter. Because once it's in that basket, it ain't my money. It belongs to the group, and the group conscience rules. The group conscience decides what needs to happen on that. Incredibly important. Incredibly important. This interdependency that we are building in Alcoholics Anonymous through the group conscience, through this mutual trust and respect, that's what everything is about. When I read the 2nd concept and it talked about what can't be changed, and Billy also touched on that last time, Article 12 of the conference charter, which we call the warranties, right? The general warranties for the conference, right? Those are the things, that the traditions, and later we added that the steps also can't be changed without the same kind of process, right? That it's important that we know that those things are going to guide us. Those are the principles that I need to live by, right? If I am going to give you a job, I'm going to trust you to do the job. I am not going to come back and micromanage you. We oversee in AA. Our trustees oversee. They don't micromanage. I was talking with somebody who, she's an organizer by trade that I sponsor. And, if you leave her to her, self, people will set food out or whatever, and she'll come along and she'll just, redo it all. Right. And I get that. I'm that kind of girl. It would be better if I fixed it. It's always going to be better if I fix it. But you're never going to learn anything. Alcoholics Anonymous, we let people fail. It is such a wonderful thing to let people fail and to believe in them. Anyway, my sponsor said, you know what, kid, you're better than that. And they set the bar high enough that sometimes I would trip and fall. That's the truth. Sometimes I do trip and fall. I am not perfect, and I don't pretend to be. But I am willing to be humble enough to go through this. Right? That I'm willing to go through this process of deflation of the ego, to not want to be in control anymore. That's what the 3rd step is all about. How arrogant are we sometimes when we're sponsoring people and we want to tell them what they should do? What they should do? One of my sponsees got pregnant and she was concerned about telling me, which I thought was silly because I was the one who suggested that perhaps she take a pregnancy test, but she was concerned about telling me. because she was afraid to let me down. And I think honestly, when then she asked me, she said, "What do you think I should do?" And I said, "I don't know. It's not my business. It's not my business what you do. I don't know what's best for me. How do I know what's best for you? What I can do is give my perspective, my experience, strength, and hope. And together, our collective conscience, we will find what's best for all of us." That's why being trusted servant is so important. That when we go and send a delegate out there, that we don't instruct them how to vote, that instead we trust them to go and to listen to what is presented to them, to then make an informed decision. Because that is what is so hard, getting the information to groups to be able to make decisions. Earlier this year, another thing that came up was, as GSO took the original $3 million drawdown, right? And we were looking at how we were going to make our seventh tradition contributions in my group, right? We had a sharing session about it later, but about what we generally do. And so it used to be that there was just this idea that everybody did 50, 30, 10, 10, and then it got flipped. And then, so there's still these, but really what it says is you're supposed to find out what the needs are and respond accordingly, right? And so how do we do that? How do we, can the group make a decision like that? And the decision is delegated to the treasurer, because the treasurer is the one who's getting the reports from the area and from intergroup and from the district and from GSO. And she is the one who has the best information about where the need is greatest. So where is the greatest need, is part of what we try to look at in our group. Now, when the question came back, why did you make that decision, right? And can we talk about that more? Of course we do. That's part of what the tradition is all about. We just don't go off and do whatever we want. Our job is to be as informed as possible, to make the best decision possible with the information that we have available, and then to be transparent about it, to be willing to discuss it. Leadership is often called upon to face heavy and sometimes long-continued criticism. This is an acid test. There are always the constructive critics, our friends indeed. I don't know. You ever feel like, oh, that guy who's just character assassinating, what a great friend, right? It's not quite how I always experience it initially. We ought never fail give them a careful hearing. When I hear somebody, I get a lot of criticism, as I said. And when they are criticizing me, here's what I have learned to do. This is my rule of thumb. Not how dare they, although that is what I want to say. It's what are they right about? What are they right about? If I can come from a position of what could they possibly be right about, then I'm listening. I'm listening. I have to learn to hear you, to want to hear you. We're terrible. We start thinking about what we're going to say while you're still talking. We should be willing to let them modify our opinions or change them completely. Often, too, we shall have to disagree and then stand fast without losing their friendship. Can we do that? That's a tall order, right? To agree to disagree. One of the things I feel very strongly about is 13 stepping. And in a lot of places, and I can speak more for mine than in others, but in a lot of places, it's easy to lean on a guy and tell him to get the heck out because he's getting creepy with a newcomer girl. That's easy. But where I am, we've had quite a series of women who do the same thing, often to women, sometimes to men too. And saying something to a woman, as a woman, I get told that I'm out of line quite a lot. I get crucified sometimes for telling somebody, that I don't believe that is along the lines with AA principles. There was a woman I was sponsoring a number of years ago, and she called me up, and she had moved across the country, and she was in a meeting, and she said, "You'll never believe what was going on." And she's telling me about this crazy whatever it is. And I said, "What did you do?" She said, "Nothing." I said, "Why didn't you do something? You're the old timer." At the time, she had 10 years. And she said, "There are people with 20 plus years." And I said, "And it's still on you, because the person who has the most tools gets to do the most work. That's the deal. If you're the only one who knows better, then you're going to have to do better." I have to be willing to give you what was given to me. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous asks of me, begs of me. This is life and death. People die here. People die here. I'm not the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. That's not the deal. You get to be as whatever you want. But it also says that if sex is selfish, that we're sure to drink. So my concern is for both people. It really is. And I can't stop things from happening, nor do I want to. And in fact, one of those couples is stuck together. You know what? That's fine. But the guy that was at issue, he heard me when I said, if this blows up, I want you to know that we're here. That's what I care about. I want them to know, because when I got 13 stepped by men and by women. And when the first time it happened to me, I went to my sponsor and I told her what was going on. And this guy was leaving messages on my machine and blah, blah, blah. I know when I'm being hit on, guys. You're not that suave, gotta tell you. And and I called her and I'm telling her, because I don't know what to do. This guy's got 5 years of sobriety and I've got 2-3 months. Okay. And I don't know what to do. I want to be able to go to the meetings and not be like freaked out. And when I call her and I tell her, you know what she said to me? She told me that I was full of myself. She told me that he was too sober to have been doing that I was wrong. So I care a lot about these things. And I am willing to stand up for my principles, because you know what I did? I left that meeting and I never went back. And I never went, for years, I wouldn't go into a straight meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous because I was scared of men. I really was. Because I didn't think that even my sponsor would protect me. That's leadership. I was taught by people in AA, you're not going to take care of me either. I have to find the people that are going to show me what I believe the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous are. And it doesn't mean I'm going to disown you because you do something wrong, but it does mean I'm going to speak up. I believe that we've ceased fighting everything and anyone in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Even alcohol. There's a difference between advocacy and being a proponent. Being a proponent means I fight for something. Being an advocate means I speak for something. And as a leader in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we do need leaders in Alcoholics Anonymous, our future depends on having good leadership in Alcoholics Anonymous. Our unity depends on having good leadership in Alcoholics Anonymous. People who are willing to step up and say the uncomfortable things. People who are willing to be sometimes maligned for saying things. It's often called upon to face heavy and sometimes long continued criticism. Yeah. And I don't like it. I don't like hearing the criticism that comes back sometimes. I don't. But you know what? I'd rather you not like me and live to not like me than to be dead. Because I believe that it was really lucky that I was able to get to somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous who told me that actually wasn't okay. And it was a gay man in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's where I found safe harbor. Whatever your story is, whatever it is, the fact that I was put in a position from a very early place to be asked to be a leader in AA from the beginning. If you've got a little, the first woman that asked me to sponsor her, I only had, 3.5, 4 months, something like that. I didn't know that much about what I was doing, but I got to help her with what little I had. My first sponsor had 2 months of sobriety. She didn't know much about what she was doing, but she got me through my first 5th step. And she got me to this position of knowing what service was. She's the one that told me I needed a service position. They didn't let me leave the room without getting a service position from my first meeting. And I was the ashtray washer. And I don't smoke. And if you've never had a job in Alcoholics Anonymous that you hate, you haven't lived. Those are the best jobs. They're the ones that you really reap the benefits out of. If you enjoy, one of my favorite, somebody made amends to me years ago. I had no idea she was angry at me, right? She comes to me and she's making amends and I, like I said, I don't know what's going on. and she confesses her former ill feeling, and of course I have no clue, and I'm getting a little uncomfortable. And then she tells me that the reason that she dislikes me so much is because I made her the chip girl, the one that gives away the chips. And I'm thinking, this is the most coveted job in AA. And she's mad at me for giving it to her. She's like, I was so shy, and it was so uncomfortable, and so I really hated you for it. And I'm thinking, and when I got to talk to her, and I said, what I knew is that you were really having a hard time getting connected, and I thought it would help you break the ice, right? Sometimes they aren't going to like what we're doing, Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But the thing is that I'm supposed to be praying for your happiness uppermost in my mind. That's what it tells me about my relationships, right? I'm here to help God's kids. Alcoholics Anonymous is not a self-help program. It's a we help others to get out of God's way program. And that's what Tradition 2 is all about. We need leaders. We need you to lead. If you have been sober any length of time, you have something to offer somebody else. By suiting up and showing up and passing a basket, that man helped other men feel like they could join a group. By willing to sponsor somebody else, by being willing to go get the cookies, by willing to step up to be area literature chair, by willing to do whatever it is. How about we start asking ourselves, what are they doing right, as opposed to what we don't agree with? We have much more that we agree with than what we don't agree with. And it is my great hope that I will always remember AA doesn't need me, not so much as I need AA. This alcoholic strives for humility, and it is spiritual pride is the worst character defect I have. I want to believe that I got it. And when I hear my mind go, I got it, I should be very, very scared, because I have a tendency to crash into brick walls. But that doesn't mean I have nothing to offer. And it doesn't mean that I should be a wallflower. And it doesn't mean that I don't have something of benefit to others. As God's people, we walk on our feet. We don't bow or scrape before anyone. Real humility is about being right-sized. I have experienced strength and hope doing a lot of different things. I would love one day to get to be a delegate. I really would. But my life hasn't been set up that way. And that's okay. Maybe someday I'll get to, maybe I won't. I got to go be one of the Zoom ops at this past year's, general service conference. I'm like, if that's as close as I get to be is the fly on the wall. I had such a great time, AA nerd through and through, but I got to help us see that, what, Zoom works. We can make this work. And nothing's going to keep AA down. That's what I was taught. No matter what, we're going to find a way to carry these principles into all of our affairs. That's my job today, carrying these principles into all of my affairs. And if it's not going my way, I need to make sure I'm not having a way anymore, because it's about the group conscience, not about mine. If you vote against me, that's okay. I'm not going to go home. I'm not going to take my toys and go home. I'm going to trust in the group conscience today. And with that, thank you very much for my sobriety.